EA Sports College Football 25. That's right. It is time for video game intel. Because here's the thing. You guys were so curious about every aspect of the game when I got to go play it in Orlando. And I was overwhelmed by the questions. And so we did a couple of shows where I talked about everything. And then I did one where I answered questions. And you were bringing up things that I didn't even remember from when I went. Somebody asked me about the checkerboard kneeling. And I was like, oh, wait, yeah, there is checkerboard kneeling. I do need to tell everybody about that. So we got to figure that out. But there are so many different aspects to this. It's amazing what they've been able to do here. And it's also amazing how many questions everybody has. And it's just everybody's excited. It's been so long since we got to play the game. So let's talk about what happens in this game. And so what we're showing on the screen now, this is from the original trailer. It's a lot of the entrances, stuff like that. This is a lot of the pageantry piece of it. They released the video last week with a little deeper dive into the gameplay. And so I wanted to talk about that because there are a lot of things that are new or different that we're going to have to get used to. Like I noticed in one clip here, and I'll show it to you on the screen now, you see the new kicking gauge. Like it's this thing that goes back and forth, and then there's an arrow that you can then move. I'll show it again. This is very quick, but you're going to have to get used to that because I'm sure if you've been playing Madden, you're used to the kind of half circle one where you got to get the thing up into the right zone and then bring it back. But this kicking gauge is new. That's something that's going to be different. And then the wear and tear thing, they explained that to us. And I was trying to take as many notes as I could. They showed us slides, but I wasn't quite sure exactly what everything was going to mean. They explain it a little better, I feel like, in the video. So here's a little clip of what's going on. Now, this is basically they're saying every hit matters, the way every hit hits each player. And this is just a case of more computing power in the current systems. They've got different tackles, different hits affect players differently. And so like they'll tell you, hey, this guy is on the verge of getting injured and prompt you on the screen. Do you want to substitute? By the way, poor Jackson Arnold taken astray in the deep dive video there with him on the field at the Cotton Bowl. But they will tell you, hey, you need to substitute this guy. Can you just, but here's the thing, you're going to see how different those guys are, because in college football, the player quality drops considerably from starter to backup for a lot of teams. And now certainty, like Georgia, Alabama, probably not as much, but that is one thing they talked about when I was there, is they really want to make sure that you feel the difference in how good players are. So that's one thing that is going to be pretty front and center. So like this wear and tear thing, if you've got a guy who's about to go out, you got to be very careful. And, especially a back, it also it's made to affect your play calling. The guy they show is Phil Maffa, the Clemson back. And so if you run Phil Maffa a bunch of times and they say his injury risk is very serious, you've got to decide, hey, do I sub him out, or do I just call some different plays for a little while to try to get that back down? And then, but also it lasts through the season if you're in dynasty mode. So you have to be very careful how you use these guys, trying to make it, more realistic. Now, sometimes they do things that are realistic that just, I think they're just picking on people. So I was watching the gameplay deep dive and noticed this little clip. What's that? Oh, that's Trevor Etienne about to score a touchdown against Florida for Georgia. Trevor Etienne transferred from Florida to Georgia this offseason. Like, you don't have to include that in your gameplay deep dive unless you just want to twist the knife on some folks. Now, I will say Georgia and Florida appear pretty frequently in that video, so it's not that. But Kevin says, I hope the wear and tear doesn't get overdone because players can take quite a bit of hits. But I think that what this is trying to encourage you to do is not have the same guy take, like, if you got a dominant running back, they don't want you being able to hand it to him 35 times in a game with 6-minute quarters. Like, that's just not realistic. You wouldn't actually do that in real life. And it reminds me, I don't know how many of you guys remember the Sega Genesis game Cyberball. It was one of my favorites. It's robot football essentially, and you would get. I think you got a budget to build players. There was a way to build players, and you had limited resources, and you could decide how you wanted to allocate them. But what everybody would always do is you'd build this great quarterback who is incredibly fast, and he'd just be able to, direct snap, just take off, score a touchdown. He'd be good for like 2 touchdowns, and then he'd blow up. So if you wanted to win a game, you'd make your quarterback this way. You'd take your 14-0 lead with him, and he would get hit on the 3rd drive and explode. And then you would have this pedestrian offense that maybe you could score 1 touchdown, like you mount 1 touchdown drive the rest of the game, but you would hope that got you through. Jeffrey says, the one thing I haven't seen with Florida State is there is no Renegade and Chief Osceola entrance. Now, okay, 2 things. It's just Osceola, not Chief Osceola. And yes, Osceola does ride in on a Renegade and does plant the flaming spear. I have seen that in the game. When I was in Orlando, I played a game that started, that was in Doak Campbell, and it does begin with that. So they absolutely have that. Nathan says, will this end up taking away from the pure and simple playability? Making it more complicated can take away the magic. I do think there's going to be a way you can set it where you take some of the realism elements out so you can have an arcade style, let's just play. Parlay Joe says the wear and tear is going to keep the Madden heads out. That's going to be interesting to see how the Madden people react to this, because they're not going to like that Sam Houston State cannot compete with Alabama if you're on the right skill level. Like if you're playing on the easy level, you can play as Sam Houston State and probably score on Alabama. But if you're playing at the level you should be playing, they've made it so it'd be very difficult for you to be competitive in that game. Jonathan says, you said you played as Liberty. Can you elaborate on stadium, jerseys, presentation, etc.? I played as Liberty on the road. So I didn't get a look at their stadium and their entrance. I was trying to look at as many kind of big, like Power 5 home field advantage atmospheres as I could. And so that's why. Speaking of home field advantage, they made a big deal out of it, and they should. So here's what some of the home field advantage looks like. You see the squiggly lines and what it's going to mean when you're trying to play. Like the controller is very much shaking. Everything is harder. And so here's where the attributes of the player come in, and they show this example in the game. So they've got the field general is one of the things they have, and you see Quinn Ewers. Now he's at home. He can see things popping up. They had another thing in the home field advantage where they show the difference between a quarterback who doesn't necessarily have the traits to perform well on the road, or is young and hasn't been in that situation before. And I think it's interesting. The example they use is going to make people mad. The example they use is the quarterback who doesn't necessarily have those traits yet is Nico Iamaleava. See, I'm getting it right. Nico Iamaleava at Tennessee playing against Georgia. And so obviously that's a very hostile environment. He's going to be in his first year as a full-time starting quarterback. So that they have Nico, not being able to manage the road environment. And then they show Carson Beck against Alabama in Tuscaloosa, and he does have the ability to negotiate that environment. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And I did play, I played at Penn State, I played at Iowa, I played at Florida, I played at Clemson. And in most of those games, I was playing as the road team. And it is it is different how the quarterback reacts. Like they give you more pre-snap information. Basically, the more veteran and cool and collected your quarterback is. So that's the trick there. Kieran says, what are your top 3 schools for Dynasty? So I declared when General Booty went in the transfer portal from Oklahoma that wherever he wound up was going to be my number 1 Dynasty mode team. So Louisiana Monroe is the one I want to start with. But I kind of think like Kennesaw State, because they're the newest FBS team. So that's the, take them the farthest, I think would be good. And then I wouldn't mind just another Sun Belt team. I don't know if you guys have noticed from listening to the show, but I really, really enjoy Sun Belt football. I love the lineup that they've put together with a bunch of schools that care deeply about football, not necessarily worrying about what metro market they're in, because I think people in Statesboro, Georgia, and people in Boone, North Carolina care deeply about college football. They care deeply about Georgia Southern and Appalachian State. James Madison fans are the same way. Marshall fans are the same way. So that's the one I think. So I think maybe Georgia Southern. I think Georgia Southern would be a lot of fun. And maybe I go back into the triple option with Georgia Southern. Obviously, Clay Helton's not running it in real life now, but yeah, it's going to be very different. DJ Senior asks, we know we cannot edit real players' ratings, and that's true because they like this. It's funny because this is where reality collides with our virtual video game world. You can't edit real players' ratings because real players, they're protecting their name, image, and likeness. Like they have made a name, image, and likeness deal with EA Sports. And so EA Sports has to make their likeness as realistic as possible. So if you took, the third string guard and made him a 99 overall, well, that's not realistic. But also if you took, say, like Will Campbell, the starting left tackle at LSU, who's going to have a very high rating, like he'll be in the high 90s. If you took him and somehow made his rating 65, like that would not be right because that's not who he is. But so can you edit game generated players' ratings in Dynasty mode? I believe you can. You can also create your own and load them in. Go Gadget said, did you get a good look at Davis Wade Stadium? I actually did play about a quarter and a half at Mississippi State because one of the people at EA Sports said, hey, you're gonna want to hear the cowbells. And you could hear them. Like it was real between plays. The cowbells are real. And so like Davis Wade Stadium, the home field advantage is a little more like, I think people who don't watch Mississippi State or have not, followed the SEC very closely may not understand that stadium when the cowbells are going is actually a very difficult place to run your offense. And I think EA Sports actually did a good job of figuring that out. I was pretty pleased with the way that worked out. One other thing I want to show you guys. So here's the picture in picture. So when you're selecting plays, you're going to get to see what's going on the screen. Now, the image they showed in that deep dive video is not really representative of what it's going to look like during the game. This was more like at the beginning of the game. So they've got a generic stadium shot. But what you're going to see in there, and you're going to have to be careful as you select plays, because a lot of the stuff going on, because they've tried to make this as much like a college football broadcast as possible. So like you just got a turnover. So now you're trying to select your next offensive play. Well, in that picture in picture, you're going to be like, if you've got a turnover prop, let's say you're Oregon State, and you've got the turnover chainsaw, you're going to see the turnover chainsaw. So you might don't get caught watching the turnover chainsaw when you should be picking your play. That's also where you're going to get your crowd reaction shots, your surrender cobras and all that stuff, your coach shots. So, which not nearly as much fun, the coach shots, until they actually get the coaches in the game, but that's going to happen. Willie Willie, this is cold. If you're the head coach for Colorado, do you have an option to do in-home visits with recruits? Yeah, unlike Coach Prime, you can do in-home visits with recruits. It is quite possible. That would be tremendous if you couldn't. That would be very realistic. But again, they don't have the real coaches in the game. So The truth says, is recruiting the same as CFP 14, or you get to make home visits? What about the coaching staff? They just randomly hire the guy. One is your OC, to get to pick. You get to pick your coordinators, and you also have to decide if you want to fire your coordinators. So that's an important thing every year. Yeah, you've got to manage that a little more. The recruiting, it seems like most of the decision making and the resource allocation in recruiting is more toward how much do you allocate toward the transfer portal versus how much do you allocate for recruiting out of high school, which is a great real life situation. Touchdown TV says, did you play at Williams-Brice Stadium? If so, is 2001 in the game? What about the Rooster Crow at that third down? I'm sure they've got the Rooster Crow. I didn't play in Williams-Brice. I would imagine that the theme from 2001 is in the game because that is a public domain song. So, like, they don't have Enter Sandman because it would be very expensive to license Enter Sandman just for that one Virginia Tech entrance, and you're not using it anywhere else. Now, they use the Kerncraft 400 song by Zombie Nation because that so many different schools use that. But like they didn't get Seven Nation Army, which I thought enough schools use Seven Nation Army that you could probably get that. But apparently it's also a little bit different licensing if you wanted to actually play the White Stripes version of Seven Nation Army or have the crowd chanting Seven Nation Army. But the theme from 2001, which, by the way, I believe it's called Sprach Zarathustra, is the real name for it. I believe that's public domain at this point, I think. I'll have to have an intellectual property attorney fact check me on that. So that's an interesting one because that is one of the more fun entrances in college football. And I'm curious to see if they have that. So, all right. Are you able to switch the abilities up to, and do all 11 guys have the same opportunity to get abilities, including the line Jet Life? I'm glad you asked this question. There's a lot of abilities in this game, a lot of new abilities that we're going to have to get used to. And yes, offensive linemen can get abilities. I don't know if you can switch them. I know with the actual players, you can't change the real life player stuff. But I put on screen a bunch of these abilities, and it may be too small for you to read some of these. There's a bunch of them. Like you've got Aftershock, Adrenaline, 50-50, 360. And I don't know what a lot of these mean. Like they explained a few of them to us, but like House Call, that's somebody with breakaway speed. Blow Up, I think that's somebody that can make good tackles in the backfield. Magician, that's probably a quarterback that has good escapability. Outside Disruptor, that's probably a good edge rusher. Option King, that's obviously going to be a quarterback who runs the option very well. Jammer would be a corner who jams receivers on the outside. Best friend with a little 3 on it would be your third down best friend, your very reliable possession receiver. Robber would probably be a safety that's great at ball, jumping in front and grabbing an interception, playing the ball more than playing the guy or being able to bait quarterbacks into making interceptable throws. Mega Leg, I would imagine, is a punter situation. If Torrey Taylor were in the game, I'm sure he'd have one of those. Headstrong, we know what that is. Headstrong is this person is mentally unflappable. If your quarterback is headstrong, when you play in a tough road environment, he's going to be more apt to handle the situation. You're going to get more information pre-snap. Extender, that would be a quarterback who can extend plays. So there is a lot of attributes, and players can have up to 8. So that's quite a bit. It's gonna be a lot of fun. So I can't wait to see what you guys think. I'm going to show you a couple more clips. The option was fun for me, and I told you guys the option's a little bit different in this game because it's not press X immediately to hand off to the dive back. It is the dive back's going to get the ball unless you press X to pull the ball. And that's a bit of different situation than before. So here we got Air Force, and then you got 2 other pitches. So you can basically, it's the same as when you're passing. The length of your button press will determine how hard you pitch the ball. And then how hard you pitch the ball will determine how risky the pitch is as well. So it's still your L1, R1 buttons as you're pitching, but how deep you depress the button, how long you depress the button will determine how quick that pitch is or how risky that pitch is. But again, let me show you that again. So you got the Air Force one. And then here's a Michigan read option play. So you see the back is getting the ball there. If you pressed X in that situation, you would pull that ball and the quarterback, but in the play that it shows, and here's the Air Force play again. We'll get to the Michigan play. In the play that it shows, the quarterback makes the right choice. The back has like 5 yards of green in front of him. But if that defensive end was crashing hard on the back, the quarterback could pull it and he'd have the green space. The other thing, and I don't think I've mentioned this in any of the other videos, and I wanted to point this out because this is a very popular play and so many teams have this play in now. And I was actually a little concerned when I saw it, like, how does it work? So, the jet motion play where you have the receiver coming across the formation, and as he's getting to the quarterback, they snap the ball and the quarterback kind of pops it to him. So that is statistically a pass. That is always called, like, you have to count that in receiving yards. You count that as a completion because it is a forward pass. Like, it's sort of offensive coordinators found a little hack where if you mess up that play, it's just an incomplete pass instead of a fumble. So that's why they do it that way. They want it to be officially a forward pass because you benefit from not losing yardage if you drop it. So this play is in a lot of playbooks. My concern was, okay, how do you get the timing of this right? Because does that receiver have a button press affiliated with him? Like, is he the X or is he the circle the triangle running across the screen and I've got to hit him, or is the R1? No, you don't have to worry about that. On that particular play, which does count as a pass, you don't have to do anything. It will just give him the ball and then he takes off running. So I was concerned about that because I was like, I'm going to mess up the timing of this. Like, if I'm playing as a worse team, there is no way I'm going to be able to get this right. But it was actually pretty easy. So I was surprised by that. One other thing before we go, I've talked about this a couple times. Now I'm going to show it to you. The pass meter. So in the game, while you are throwing, you get a meter, much like your kicking meter, that will show you the gauge of how hard you're throwing the ball. Like, you can throw, if you want to go light, you can throw it up over the top of the defense. If you want to throw a laser beam, you're going to hit the button hard. But you'll now see it in graphic form on the screen when you're making that decision. And I think that's helpful. I know some people have said, well, how do I turn that off? I actually think it's pretty helpful. I liked using it when I was playing. It did help me kind of figure out how to feather the ball a little bit more because there are going to be situations where you do want to layer it and throw it up over the defense and let it drop into the receiver's hands. And there's other ones where he's wide open down the field and you just want to fire a laser beam. So you've got that option. And I do feel like it's easier to see now, but it's going to be interesting. I'm sure there will be things that people love, that people hate, but there's a lot going on in this game. And let's see. It's June 14th. Depending on what version you ordered, 2 days from now, you could be a month away from having it in your hot little hands. But July 19th, I believe is the regular release date. July 16th, if you bought the deluxe edition or the bundle with Madden. I am very curious now. I'm a little mad at the SEC because SEC Media Days happening right when the thing comes out. Like, I can't steal my son's PlayStation and take it to Dallas for SEC Media Days because he would kill me because he couldn't play the game right away. So yeah, it's going to be a couple days for me before you get your full-on review of the game because I will be at SEC Media Day. So I'm sorry about that, but let's just plan better next year, SEC. How's that sound? Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for listening in podcast form. Thank you for being here. Like and subscribe if you like the show. Please tell a friend if you like the show. I'm on vacation next week, but that doesn't mean you're not getting shows. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we will have shows. So Monday, Clark Brooks and I talking all the big returning quarterbacks in college football this year. Clark is the SEC stat cat. He did a deep dive, video and advanced stats, into pretty much every major starting returning quarterback, and it is fascinating stuff. A lot of things that you probably weren't thinking about when we were talking about all these quarterbacks. We'll talk to Clark about that. On Wednesday, we start the My Favorite Games series, and boy, is this going to be fun. Brent Hubbs of VolQuest will talk about his favorite Tennessee game. Chris Ballas of the Wolverine will talk about his favorite Michigan game. On Friday, more My Favorite Games. We've got Jake Rowe from Dogs HQ talking about his favorite Georgia game, and Spencer Holbrook from Letterman Row talking about his favorite Ohio State game. So lots of fun. Those shows were so much fun to record, those My Favorite Games. So if you listen and you're like, well, you didn't do my favorite team, don't worry. We're going to do a couple more throughout the course of the summer because I had such a good time reliving those games, rewatching those games. We've got to do more just because it's so much fun. And I think you guys are going to really enjoy it too, even if it's not your favorite team. Now, Alabama and Ohio State, I will say you catch some strays losing in some of these games because when you lose, it's a big deal. But don't worry. We've got the Ohio State favorite game. We will get to the Crimson Tide favorite game where Alabama wins. Don't worry. We'll get to it. But thanks so much. And I'll talk to you live again a week from Monday.